Okay, so thank you very much, Richard. So I'm going to be brief as well. But I just wanted to say a few words about my own experiences of partnerships and knowledge exchange. And as you say, that comes from a couple of different directions. So I'm based in the archaeology department. I'm one of the deputy heads of department. And in that role, we all have these different sort of remit. And my remit is engaging with our external partners and overseeing and trying to understand those partnerships that we as a department have, both within the city, which is mostly what I'm going to talk about today, but also further afield. And actually, most of my partnerships are international because my own work is in Africa. But then I also, in my role, and then, so as part of that role in the archaeology department, I've really just been trying to understand and to publicise some of those partnerships, and to reach out to some of our local partners and communicate to them the kinds of things that we have done and that we can do. And so managing a website that sort of flags up the different things that we already do and that we can do, and how people can contact us if they want. And I also organise a partnerships newsletter, which goes out to people who have signed up, and tells them about some of the research that we're doing together with our external partners. And part of that is just to give people a sense of the possibilities and the ways that we already work collaboratively with people outside the academic world. But then I also have a role, as Richard has said, as one of the university research theme champions for the culture and communication theme. And our remit as theme champions is to encourage and stimulate and support interdisciplinary research, and to help our colleagues to develop collaborations and partnerships. And that includes working between departments, but also with external partners. So that's given me a sort of bigger perspective on the ways that some of the partnerships within my department fit into some of the ways that the university itself is collaborating, and the ways that many of my colleagues across departments are collaborating. And one of the things, actually, which I'm not going to talk about too much here, but which has made me realise, is that a lot of us are collaborating with the same partners. And I don't know, some of them may be here now, but you might find that you hear from lots of different departments, and that's partly because a lot of us are really excited to try and work with external partners, and we find ourselves reaching out to some of the same people. But what I wanted to do here, because I want to keep this brief, was actually just to talk about a particular experience of mine, and to use that as a way of just talking about some of the sort of lessons that I've learned, and that maybe we can think about in having partnerships between university partners and non-academic partners. And that was the experience of working on the Makers and Shapers of York Festival, which is due to happen over the course of 2022. It's actually now going to be slightly longer. I think it's going to run for a couple of years. And it is an idea for a citywide festival with multiple external partners in York. And it actually began as the 2022 festival. It started as a celebration of anniversaries for some of the people that we in the archaeology department were already working with. So the York Archaeological Trust, the York Civic Trust, the Philosophical Society, Yorkshire Museums, and various other collaborators, particularly at the City of York Council. And they were hoping for a series of events celebrating those anniversaries of those organisations across the city during 2022, and had formed a committee to get together and sort of think about how all those events could maybe be sold and badged as a larger festival. And that's where this title, The Makers and Shapers of York, came from. It grew and became a larger collaboration, and in particular the City of York Council came in to support it. We quickly realised that we needed help, and we asked for it from the Make It York initiative, which aims to sort of celebrate and publicise York as a destination. And with them, actually, we have now applied for funding, and we hope that we'll get some funding for a lot of the publicity that surrounds this event. But anyway, the Department of Archaeology was really asked to participate, and I participated as its representative in a supportive role. It wasn't an anniversary for us. We weren't really sort of part of this. And we were brought in with this idea that we could maybe use some of our students to participate in some of the events that these organizations were already planning, and in particular there was a hope that we would host a conference where we'd talk about urban archaeology, which in particular was a theme that the York Archaeological Trust wanted to bring up. And so we were sort of brought in as a friend in a supporting role. Our big contribution was going to be hosting a conference, ideally on urban archaeology. And I think a lot of that was based on the perception of our partners in the city about what we might do, what our strengths were, and how we might be able to contribute to this festival that really they had envisaged and they had planned from the start. But there were some challenges there. And really the biggest challenge was that none of this was really part of the research agenda of anyone in the department. So there was nobody in the Department of Archaeology who was sort of desperate to run a conference on urban archaeology, which could then incorporate these partners. Instead, it was more like a sort of service that we might offer. And for that reason, it was quite sort of challenging to think it through, to engage people in the department in the idea, but also really to find space and time, to be honest, to do that work in between everything else that we were doing. There were lots of positive things about going along to these meetings every couple of months. They opened a lot of conversations. We launched a lot of spin-off projects. In particular, our students did a lot of field work on some of the projects around the city walls, in the museum gardens, in a sort of supportive role for our partners. And we also, I successfully applied for a PhD project together with the Civic Trust, thinking about alternative narratives on heritage in the city. But then COVID came along, and actually none of these meetings happened for a long time. Eventually, when we did get together and start thinking about a festival again, it had changed shape in lots of different ways, and also many of the initiatives that were happening had gone off the boil. But actually, in some ways, this had been a really good thing for our collaboration with our partners and for some of the ideas that we were then coming up with, because we were presented after, sort of as we started coming back together, with much more of a blank slate as to what we might do and when. And actually, I went along to various meetings, and eventually it became clear that the strongest collaboration here was going to be between the department and the York Archaeological Trust, and that we were probably going to work together on this potential conference or maybe on something else. And so we started having a series of meetings to sort of start again from that blank slate and think, okay, well, what would fit with what both of us might want to do. And actually in those meetings, since sort of relaunching this 2022 idea, we've come up with completely different idea. We're not doing a conference on urban archaeology anymore. And instead we have developed this idea of a people's museum, or it's become called the Museum of Me. And it's going to be a project in which we're going to engage members of York's public by getting through a series of outreach events, getting people to bring along objects that they're interested in, which will then be sort of curated, and we'll write stories about those objects. They'll be put into pop-up museums around the city. And we're also going to create a digital resource around that, a website where you can investigate these objects and the stories that they allow us to tell. And that idea actually draws on the strengths of both of our institutions. So it draws on our departmental strengths in digital archaeology and our museum studies masters that we've just begun. And it will draw on a lot of student placements and ongoing research projects that we already have. And it also draws on the York Archaeological Trust initiatives that they have at the moment, which are all about engaging marginalised communities, using archaeology, using objects as a way of reaching out to different groups of people. So hopefully you can watch this space, and I'm sure you'll all come to the museum with me and bring us a wonderful object. But really, rather than just sort of talking about that as a project, I wanted to use that just as a way of talking about the lessons that I had learned through this process. I think what was really clear was that both sides need to be bringing something to the partnership. And actually, this worked so much better once we were sort of coming to that blank slate and thinking about the strengths that each side brought. I think it was also important for us to have a conversation about what each side can and cannot do. So our external partners are not just hosts for us to run a lecture about some research that we're doing anyway, but likewise, the university are not consultants or event organisers. So we're not just there to do a little bit of research around somebody else's agenda. We've actually got research that we're bringing to it as well. And I think this idea of partnerships, and in particular the idea of knowledge exchange, actually speaks to that quite well. This idea that each side is bringing expertise, and you probably need to begin with a conversation about what that expertise and what those aims and ambitions might be. And that's my final point, really, was that all of this brought home the importance of dialogue and developing conversations over a period of time. And this sort of 2022 festival process really brought that home. It was a very long sort of period of time in which we eventually have sort of come down to a series of things that are really valuable for everybody involved. And fingers crossed they'll also be funded. So thank you.